Welcome to our meeting. The date is April 7, 2026. The time is 6 p.m. This is an open meeting of the Grand Island City Council. The City of Grand Island abides by the Open Meetings Act in conducting business. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is displayed in the back of this room as required by state law. Now I ask that you rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will now perform roll call.
Councilmember Sheard.
Present.
Councilmember Stelk will be absent. Councilmember Conley.
Present.
Councilmember Nickerson.
Present.
Councilmember Brown.
Present.
Councilmember Hazy.
Present.
Councilmember Mendoza. Present. Council President O'Neill.
Present.
Councilmember Pollock. Councilmember Lanfear. And Mayor Steele.
Present. Also present are Jill Grenier, the city clerk, Patrick Brown, the city administrator, Carrie Fisk, the city attorney, and Keith Kurtz, the public works director. A sign-up sheet was available in the lobby for individuals wishing to provide input on any of tonight's agenda items. If you did not sign up to speak on an agenda item, please come forward, state your name and the agenda topic on which you will be speaking. No one has come forward, so we shall continue with item 5A, permitting mobile food units. Division Chief Thomas, are you presenting? Please proceed.
Mayor and Councilman, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Phil Thomas. I'm the Fire Prevention Division Chief for the City of Grand Island. I took over for Chief Holtz about a year ago, and this is one of the first things that I kind of learned that we are not doing is permitting mobile food units. That's in the code, so we've been working on this process for several months now. Just kind of the issue at hand. One of the things is mobile food units combine open flame, propane systems, electrical loads, and the big difference is from restaurants is the public proximity. They're right next to all the people. So if there is a fire or explosion, it is a risk. Currently, we have no local fire or life safety permit or permitting process in Grand Island. They don't have any consistent fire inspection because we don't permit them. This just creates increased risk of fire, explosion, and public injury. Just our objectives: reduce fire and life safety risks associated with mobile food units. We want to ensure compliance with the International Fire Code 2021, which is our adopted fire code in the City of Grand Island. Section 319 specifically is mobile food unit section. It was added in 2019, and so we're a little bit behind the ball here. Establish a consistent local permitting inspection process, support safe operation, and it's not our goal to restrict business. Our commitment, permitting is not about creating obstacles or shutting businesses down. We did form an internal working committee that we met several times towards the end of last year and into this year. The person that was heading up that committee left the city, and now I step up to kind of head the committee, I guess. We held 2 informational meetings with mobile food unit owners. The first meeting was very well attended. There was over 100 people came to that first meeting. But what we found out is there was a whole bunch of Spanish speaking that didn't understand at all what we said. So we had another meeting that was Spanish only speaking with an interpreter. We incorporated their feedback into the proposed process that was in your packet. The council adopted codes, the International Fire Code 2021. The fire code requires a permit for mobile food units. So since that is our adopted code, I think we could probably start permitting them, several years ago, but there's just not a process for it. And I'm sure the city wants other rules, and that's what this packet's about. So their current requirements for a food truck, they have to get their Nebraska sales tax, they have to get GI food and beverage tax, the Department of Agricultural annual food establishment fee, they go to the Central District Health Food Vendor and get a vendor permit, and really all they're looking at is food safety and how they wash their hands and keeping hot water. It's nothing about fire and life safety. Just the proposed requirements is that they would have safety inspections. This is nothing different than local restaurants here in town do. They have to have their hoods inspected, their sprinkler system inspected. When my inspectors go in there, they look for those documents that they have been inspected, the hood's been cleaned, and basically that's what we'd be looking for on food trucks. One of the specific things for food trucks that they would need to do is an annual propane system leak test. That is very specific to food trucks. Annual hood test, just like any restaurant, and annual fire extinguisher inspection, again, just like any restaurant. This is just an idea for how we're going to go through this permitting process. They would do an online application submission through CitizenServe, which is what we do all our permitting through right now. Upload all the required documentation, because they got to have all that stuff before they come to us. A multi-department review, which that's the way CitizenServe works, goes from the fire department through the people that need to approve it. The kind of the final thing would be pass a fire safety inspection. So after they have all their other permits and they're signed up for the food and beverage tax and pay their permit, they got to pass the inspection, then fire could issue the annual permit. Chad Nabity added this slide, and he was going to be here, still not here? Okay. This is nothing new to me, so I'm sure I can talk on this. Where can a mobile food unit legally operate? Zoning applies to mobile food unit operations. They can legally operate in any zoning district that allows restaurants. If you look in the zoning matrix, there is not mobile food trucks, mobile food trailers, but there is restaurants in the matrix. I think that's something we probably ought to add later on, is add that into the zoning matrix, mobile food units where they can actually be. But right now, restaurants are allowed in these different zoning districts. Planning department's working on an interactive map that could be used by mobile food unit owners, property owners, and code enforcement. One thing we talked about, so they can all legally operate in those zones. What happens if they have a birthday party or something where they need to operate in a zone it's not allowed? We talked about doing special event or temporary use permits. When they're trying to operate in an area that zoning or other regulations do not allow, such as parks and residential districts, they would already have to have their Grand Island annual permit, and then it would be a very simple process in CitizenServe to log into their account they already have and say, I want to operate for a day or two in a different area. And fire, I put on here that we could make the final approval on that. It got brought up at the state fair. I even contacted the state fire marshal. Talked about we were going to be working down this process, and I kind of asked him for any assistance or help, and he just kind of told me, let me know what you're going to do, because you need to do something for the state fair. Mobile food units at state fair would be inspected as part of the state fair inspection process. And for those of you that don't know, the day or two leading up to state fair, when they're all setting up, my inspectors are out there inspecting all the buildings, making sure all the exits are clear, and we already have a state fair inspection fee, and I'm just proposing that we increase that a little bit because we will also do the mobile food units. These are just the proposed fees. So the state fair inspection fee is currently $1,600, just proposing raising that to $2,000. Annual mobile food unit permit would be $100, which that's the same permit fee we charge businesses in town. Special event temporary use is just $25 per day. The main thing is we want to know that they're operating in that area. And then the $25 would be used for administrative fees. One of the things we really took away from those 2 meetings with the public was they need some time to ramp up to meet the codes. One thing that we really learned, and we've had a lot of comments from people that operate food units outside of Grand Island, where they do permit them, they're good to go. They're ready day one whenever we decide to do this. But there's other ones that have never left Grand Island, they've never been permitted or inspected. They don't have the right stuff. So they really wanted some time, so we're proposing we begin this process next year, March of 2027, and issue an annual permit that starts April 1st. That's about the time where the spring's coming and get the food trucks out. One thing that we discussed was we talked about those fees of $100. We talked about having a, whatever we want to call it, but a food truck rodeo, like at the event center, where they all come there and then we can inspect them just one after the other. It would reduce the time that it takes for us to inspect them. And then since it's reducing that time, we could actually have a reduced fee if they come to that one day only. And then if they pass that, we even talked about, working with the event center on having like a food truck weekend out there. So maybe they could make their money back just in that quick weekend. So why is this important? Reduces liability exposure. We're supposed to be permitting, and we have not been. We need to get this going. Aligns with the adopted fire code. Creates a consistent enforcement for the food units. Improves public safety at events and gatherings. And one of the things if you guys are thinking about this, or if you go to Google, if you just Google mobile food unit fires or explosions and look at the images, they're all over. I mean, these are happening. We've been pretty fortunate in Grand Island. We haven't had an explosion like they did in Hastings, or a fire that they also had in Hastings with another mobile food truck. So, and it supports responsible local businesses. The ones that are doing this and doing it well, like I said, they're already set up. It's the one we were talking out here with Doug. It's the ones that don't have a Type 1 hood already in their trailer that's going to be expensive. That's the one thing. And if they cook with grease-laden vapors, they have to have a Type 1 hood. And I had 3 or 4 come up to me during our meetings, and those are the ones that don't have them. That's all I have for the presentation. In your packet, it had the full Word document with all the rules and proposed fees, and I included our version 1 checklist for permitting and inspecting, and it shows all the different things our inspectors would be looking for to meet the IFC 2021.
Mr. Brown has some comments.
I've been in the food service business for over 20 years in Grand Island, and this is very comprehensive and detailed, and it goes right to the point. I didn't see anything in all this that I reviewed that I thought was questionable. It's everything, kind of much what we have to do in a restaurant as it is right now, and it probably should have been done maybe 5 years ago or so, 10, but you did a real good job, and looks good to me.
Mr. Sheard.
Thank you. Thanks for putting all this together. I think it's fantastic that we are, I'd say proactive, but you made it clear that maybe we're behind the eight ball a little bit, but I appreciate in your new role that you're taking this on. I think most people would agree that food trucks are kind of a vibrant part of a city. They're a great asset, adds to nightlife, it adds to just variety, and it's just a difference that, you know, when people come to a town that has them, they're looking for them. So I appreciate that we're trying to be welcoming of them. A couple of things you said and a couple of things you didn't say that I want to ask you about. You mentioned that we had to have a meeting for Spanish speaking, which would tell me that that's a pretty big population of food trucks. Is the permitting process going to be done in Spanish?
I will definitely have a Spanish version, yes, Spanish version of that. And yeah, if they go to the website, we can do it in Spanish also.
I think that would be wise.
Absolutely.
If we're truly doing this not as a
Right.
punitive thing, but as to help their business be better, then let's be open and supportive.
One thing, I gave all of you English versions. I also have Spanish versions of this that we had at those meetings.
Awesome. I'm not smart enough to speak Spanish or read Spanish, but
Yeah.
I appreciate that you have it. On the process, you mentioned kind of the steps through it. How long does that process take? If I came to you with my food truck and I said, hey, I need to get this done right, what is the length of time it takes?
Like a brand new food truck or?
Yeah.
So a brand new food truck, like you got to start with the state and work your way down, get the Central District Health Department. I mean, if you buy a brand new food truck, it'd probably, including us, it'd probably take a month or two.
Okay.
Would be.
And if I'm existing and I just want to get compliant, a lot of those are probably going to be same steps if I haven't taken them. But the paperwork that you mentioned in here, or that process, on our side of the city, what is the timeline, you think?
I think it'd be pretty quick, within 2 weeks, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Is there an enforcement of this? Because you guys are doing the permitting, who is enforcing the permitting? Is that going to be code enforcement? Is that going to be GIPD?
Talked about code enforcement in the committee meetings. Yep.
One of the things I know that the Central District Health Department has talked about when I've met with them on some different topics is it's hard to track them down because they're not always in the same spot. They don't go to the same place. Is there anything in this process that would require heads up when they're going to be someplace, or notifying people in a surrounding area they're going to be somewhere? Is that part of the process at all?
Not at this time, but
Okay.
it definitely could be.
I'm just curious because there's different things with the zoning of where they can be and where they can't be. I just didn't know if they had to get permission to be in those places from anybody.
So we actually have somebody in finance who peruses Facebook, because when they come, they advertise, right? And so we have our list, and if they're not on the list, and then it'll start that process.
Well, that's smart, because here I'm thinking of just the people in town, but then I think about, like, On the Hook, the fish truck that comes, and every time they come, I see them on Facebook, and my wife says, we're going to the fish truck tonight. If
In my meeting with the Central District Health, that's how they do it too.
they look for them on Facebook.
They watch
and-
for them to advertise that they're going to be in this area, and then they look at their list and see if they got them on the list, and if they don't, they go out there and inspect them.
So if somebody's traveling through and they want to stop, they have to go through this whole process as well?
That was a big question. I'm not sure we have a great answer for that yet.
That might be preventative of somebody stopping in Grand Island or Nebraska for that matter. That kind of gets to my question on the state fair then. I know there's somebody at the state fair who's in charge of all the food trucks, and he's a great guy. He mentioned to me that there's a provision in this about the proximity from one truck to another. Can you speak to that a little bit?
It's 10 foot. They have to be 10 foot away from anything combustible, so from each other, from buildings, from, yes. And that's in the code.
Is that, okay. Did they speak to you about that being prohibitive for them, or we have a year at least
Yeah,
to rework
Not
it?
yet, we haven't.
Okay. When they come from out of town for the fair or a food truck thing, is there an ability to do something expedited that gives them, like you talk about the state fair coming and seeing them all there while they're lined up, but is there any thought, or have you put some more thought into an expedited version for visiting trucks?
Good, and we probably should. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think this is great work so far. I think it's important work, and I appreciate the work you guys are doing on it, and appreciate you trying to keep Grand Island safe.
Mr. Nickerson?
Well, thank you, Phil, for bringing this to us tonight. I'm interested in your meetings, the 2 meetings that you had. How talkative was the group? How much informal feedback was there between everybody? Was it more one-directional, or did you get a lot of interaction? How did that go overall?
We definitely had quite a bit of interaction towards the end. I mean, for each meeting. The one food truck came to me and basically said, how is the city going to pay for my new Type 1 hood? That was the really only negative comment that I had.
They ask you how's the city going to pay for what they need to install? Okay.
That was really the only negative comment that we had. The rest of them are just they were just asking, what do we need to do to get ready?
Right.
And
So there wasn't a lot of initial pushback, except this one person that's not happy with whatever they need to do, more than likely was not in compliance with what you would have
they
expected.
said we've been in Grand Island for 5 years without a Type 1 hood. Can we be grandfathered? No.
Answer is no. No, and I think the good point is Fire Code 2021 kind of tells you this is what the rules are now, right? I mean, that's what we fall back on, and it's not that we're not reinventing the wheel. This is the code, and this is what you're going to be held to now.
Council adopted code, so.
Yeah, so I mean, it takes the monkey off our back, and it just says these are the rules. This is what we need to live by. So the Type 1 hood, is that one that has a built-in suppression system? So that's just what that means?
It has to have a built-in suppression system, and you can see them on the trailers. If they have a big exhaust thing on the top, they have a Type 1 hood. But what goes with that is they need to have it regularly cleaned, and they have to have it regularly inspected. And I'm guessing if they don't leave Grand Island, they don't do that.
Yeah, and that's the important part. I come from obviously food processing business for 20 years where we ran it on a large scale basis. We're talking about 20, 30,000 pounds an hour on one line through fryers and all of that. So I am very well aware of the importance of keeping these things cleaned and what can happen if they're not cleaned. And that's, to your point, I think we're lucky that nothing major has happened, no major fires, no explosions, because it's just a matter of time and people not doing their job that this stuff does happen. It just takes one incident and lives can be at stake here. My question, and I also kind of interested in this Type K extinguisher. Apparently, as I looked at that to see, it's kind of a soapy foamy stuff is what they use to kind of blanket the fires. Is that how that all works?
And Type K just basically stands for kitchen, and one of the main things you can use it for is so it doesn't ruin all the food, and it's better on grease fires. So they would actually need both of them, an ABC and a K,
Okay.
if they have grease-laden vapors in them.
The suppression system itself, is it based on a K system, you think, or?
They're different, but it's very similar to where it doesn't ruin everything.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Well, then I'm interested in the inspection process. I know fire safety, that's what your group will be doing. But when you're talking about hoods, leak tests, extinguishers and all that, is that a totally separate group now that's out there, has their own businesses that are out doing that? So these folks have to contact them?
That's, I was even, as I was trying to set this up, like I talked about that food truck rodeo, I even talked to a few people here in town, and most of them said they'd be willing to come to that, and it'd basically just be a stop, stop, stop,
Oh, yeah. One-stop shop, get it all done. in
get it
one-
all done.
Any idea what the price is on all that stuff? Is it quite expensive for all, because again, we're talking about the vendors, they've got to pay this money before you can ever sell whatever you fry. So they got to pay all this money up front before they can even start making a profit. Do you have any idea what the burden is going to be on a food operator?
I don't have a total. The one I called several places about the leak testing because we haven't been doing that, so I wanted to know there's places in town that do it. And it was $75 to do leak testing.
Not unreasonable.
So I don't know how much a hood cleaning for a little hood and inspection would be.
Doug says that's about $400 for a good thorough cleaning, probably. Yeah. And the leak tests are, do you think they're the super sniffer type things? Or are they the foam that you spray on it to see if anything's leaking? Or
Basically, they would pressurize the system and see if the pressure leaks down.
Okay.
I got Rich and Sons and Bosselman and Expert RV all said that they would do it. There may be other places in town too.
Part of this process then, when we go to the permit area, will you have a list of people, potential people who can meet these other needs? It would be nice if we talk about a one-stop shop to go have all this done. It would be nice if I go to my permit page. Now I've got a list of these people can do hood inspections and cleanings. These folks can take leak tests. These folks can do your extinguisher test. Can we kind of link that together, or do you
Well,
already have it?
I actually already handed that out to them. Like,
Good.
I handed them a list on both meetings
Okay.
because my inspectors carry around a list with them of hood cleaners, hood inspectors. The only thing I had to add was that LP leak testing, and I just handed them, had the sheets for them at the meeting.
Okay. When you answered the question about permits in Spanish, that's obviously very important, and you got that covered. The education process, we've had 2 meetings, but then we've got to educate folks that are out there now that are already in business to know that this is the new business. This is what we have to do. And how do we do that? How do we let them all know?
That's the way we started was everybody that's paying the food and beverage tax, we have their name and address, and we could probably do another meeting on here's the actual rules, because the first 2 were informative, and we just had back and forth discussion. The next one could be here's what it actually is, but we're just haven't got there yet.
Okay. I see we've got city attorney.
In addition to kind of the efforts that the fire department would go to, in 2023, the legislature passed, they call it the Nebraska Pure Food Act, which also regulates through the Department of Agriculture mobile food vendors. They maintain a pretty comprehensive list of all the regulations and an ongoing list of all of the active city regulations across the state of Nebraska. So that way, mobile food vendors have kind of a one-stop shopping place to go to look at both the state rules and each respective city's rules. So I think in Mr. Thomas's presentation where he included that Department of Agriculture notice, that's to make sure we get on that list so those vendors have that one-stop shopping place to look that's available 24/7 as well.
Good, very good. Then my other question was, you're proposing a fee increase from $1,600 to $2,000 for the state fair. And what's that $400 for? What inspections are entailed in that $400 increase?
Basically, everything that they do right now, but they would have to add in going to every mobile food unit and inspecting them just like we would ones that are in Grand Island.
So I'm trying to figure out where you came up with a $400 price tag. I would assume that we'd base this on an hourly figure. Well, how many hours do we think it would take? To me, not knowing what you're talking about, $400 seems like a pretty steep increase to go from $1,600 to $2,000 if we're only spending an hour at a food truck. And so you're going to have to help me understand that, because I
Well,
think that's a
that's-
little bit,
That 1,600 is for the whole thing, so 400 extra would be for the 20 food trucks. So, if it takes,
not per truck.
it's for the whole fair.
Oh, so it's not a per unit?
No, and I would
So
even
so run
say,
that, help me understand that then,
I would even say
$1,600?
1,600 is probably pretty low, but that's the fee that I came into this business.
$1,600 for, I'm going to say you, is it you or somebody else? That's
My two inspector, I have two
Okay,
inspectors.
so the 1,600 covers the cost of covering all of the inspections of that? Okay, and we don't know, do we know how many food trucks that is, roughly?
I mean, I've been to the state fair several times, but I'm guessing.
There's a lot.
six-
70, okay. So again, when we break that down to an hourly fee, that's not terribly high.
Probably
Those are-
low, to be honest,
Yeah.
but
So if you're saying we're going to add additional inspections for the $400 increase is what you're
yeah, so my inspectors spend at least 2 days right now going through all the buildings, and I would say it'd probably take the two of them another day to,
Okay, so I was just
Food
thinking this
trucks.
was a price each unit had to pay, and I thought, holy moly, you guys sell a lot of fried ice cream and whatever else to get that.
I'm really
covered.
hoping a lot of them are from Grand Island. I know they're not, but if they were from Grand Island, it'd be very simple to just check off, because they already got the Grand Island annual permit. But
Okay, so the 2,000 proposal is really for your group to do all of the state fair food truck. Okay, that makes more sense to me. I just thought that was a big jump.
Well,
But
we-
not if you're
in our-
spreading it across everything.
In our committee, we had a kind of a big debate on the state fair and how we're going to handle all the different food trucks, and that was just my idea, that we would increase that a little bit to cover the cost of my inspectors being out there.
Sure, and again, if we spread that over the cost of each unit, it's not an astronomical amount of money for people that are out there devoted to safety. Okay, well, thank you, Phil. I covered all of my questions. I appreciate it.
Mr. Hossie?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for your presentation, Phil. I think we definitely need to have, the facility fire hazard codes updated and to where we need to be. But I also think that, the foodborne illness side of this is also probably a bigger risk to the public than the fire. They're both risks, both the facility or, the fire hazard. And so one of the things I'd like to see is a coordinated effort and a single list. And I know that Carrie mentioned that Nebraska Pure Food Act, which is probably a good part, step in that. But we have the Central District Health Department, and I don't know how often, do you know how often they do the food site inspections? Because you said earlier that they do the food vendor permitting. Do you know how often that is?
They do it yearly also.
Well, I would say that, it seems to me that restaurants have a little bit of a different standard with the USDA inspections and all this stuff, and got to wash your hands before you, there's all kinds of rules. They're much harder to enforce in a mobile food truck, and it seems to me that once a year on a food truck, that's really not enough inspections for all of the stuff that's going on there. So I'd like to see the central, you had a list of 3 departments, you were talking about finance, and I didn't see the health department on that list, but I'd like to see them all coordinated. So when they do food inspections, that when they've done food inspections, and that finance knows, so that they can educate them on the food and beverage tax or the sales tax, or, so I think finance needs to be a part of it as well, but I want to make sure it's one city coordinated effort, because we pay the health district money to enforce our city codes, so it's all code compliance from my perspective. It's all city codes for anybody that happens to be in Grand Island, whether it's health codes or fire codes. I want to make sure we have one team effort in addressing the mobile food unit people. So the other part, and I don't personally buy a lot of food from the mobile unit, but I do, like on the 4th Street Festival and others, there's people that I talk to and buy some of their stuff that they make at home. And then they go downtown and set up a table, or even out of a truck. They might make it at home. One person I talked to that I bought a taco from, he made the beef at home. and he brings his pot in his truck, he's not going to have a hood. But I'm saying, what's the difference? How do you handle those mobile food places that make their stuff at home? Because it seems to me that the USDA will have very strict guidelines about how long can you have that pot of hamburger or that pot of whatever, and you're going to serve it in the community, and maybe you only make it once a week. I mean, I'm sure there's temperature standards and record requirements, all of that stuff that I'm sure is available. How are we, no matter if it's health district or fire department or finance or building or code enforcement, how do we all know what those rules are, or how do we try to address it as one city?
Question. I did not know that people actually brought stuff without a food truck. So one thing I will say is there's many food trucks in town that don't create grease-laden vapors. And they've already contacted me and they've showed me what they do. They do not need Type 1 hoods. So there are some of those out there too. Like one of them's a hot dog vendor. All they do is the hot dogs just rotisserie. They don't ever cook them. They just bring them to temperature. Well, they don't need Type 1 hoods. I would assume what you're talking about is more of the health department, because I won't be involved in a food truck for them. But
Yeah, because I was on the health board as a city council rep for a dozen years, and it was a big issue. And I don't know that annual is enough for the food side. I don't know how often we do restaurants either. Forget the mobile side. When you have a brick and mortar store, I don't know how often we inspect them, but it seems to me that it ought to be more often than once a year, no matter what it is. I just want to make sure that we have one unified effort as a city, and we don't have everybody having to call the city 3 different times to get 3 different sets of inspections. So I think that's important. The other thing that I heard a lot of about it, like the location, as a council member, I got one call. They had one set up in a residential front yard. And ironically, he was in a B2 zone. And so because it was along Eddy Street, there was a house, it was actually zone business. And so he couldn't do it in the front yard, but he could move it over to the driveway. And so it's still in front of a residential house. And so the zoning, I think, was part of the answer to the complaint that I'd received as a council member, and just by working through that. So, but I'd also heard that they're on private parking lots. For example, JBS might have several of these mobile food units right in the parking lot. So when the shift changes or whatever they do, that these are out there too. And you could have it at another, establishment as well. So I don't know, when we start talking about approved locations, some people just have them come out there to address where the people are. And so I think that's an important part to keep in mind. But I'd also like to understand the ones that need the hood versus the ones that don't need, because we had a brick and mortar store here on South Locust that actually had a TIF project that didn't meet the requirements because of the Type 1 hood. And it cost them a lot of money, from my recollection of that conversation. And it cost them a lot of money just in a brick and mortar store to have that type of hood actually installed there. So I think it's a big deal if you're the mobile food unit. So I think that'll be important to find out there. I think that's all I had, so thank you, Phil.
Mr. Landfear.
I attended the meeting that you had out at the library, and I want to compliment you on having an excellent presentation. The things that I took away from that, the concerns they had were what they would have cost them to come into compliance, and how would this hurt their business, their profits. And just looking at this, I would say you have put together something that they should be able to live with. My one concern is enforcement. What happens when you find someone who will not come into compliance? What do you do?
It's kind of, at least there's a little bit of an outline in it in those rules towards the end on what happens, and that's where it comes down to code enforcement.
And code enforcement does what?
I can issue fines and daily fines, and I might have to.
Okay, again, you've done an excellent job, and
This is something that the city needs. Thank you.
Mr. O'Neill?
So really, the main intent is public safety in this, and I think you mentioned some recent things in Hastings where a couple had issues, and you talked about, kind of getting on Google and researching a bit. Are there any type of stats over the type of injuries that come out of this stuff, or fatalities, or severity of that?
Sure there is, but I do not have anything.
No,
right
no
now.
problem. But and I get it, because you're saying in this case people are just a lot closer to the kitchen than they would be in a restaurant, so the liability is definitely higher. So in reality, we adopted a fire code, and was that about 4 years ago? We adopted the code that had it. We just didn't really have the permitting process.
Right.
And that's all we're trying to do, is give you the extra tool to be able to issue those permits and try and get people and have that so we can make it safer for everyone else. I really like the idea too on what you talked about, maybe doing the bulk inspection. I'd really support that idea. I think it'd be easier for you, easier for them, and love the idea of trying to support that into making like a bigger event out there as well. I think it's a great idea. I think you guys have a lot of really good common sense type of controls out there. On the fire extinguishers, so those have to be inspected annually as well, correct? I think, and they get a tag on them. So that'd be a little extra cost, but technically they should probably have those anyways. I'd assume for doing business, but.
Really, that's no different than a restaurant or a business in town.
Yeah, we're just kind of making sure everyone plays on the same field, basically. One other question, this might be a Pat question. The memo in there, it said something about maybe an extra $10,000 in total fees overall. If that's the ballpark number you think you were talking about?
So for the food and beverage tax, we have right at 100 that are reporting. And so I just $100 times 100.
And then, so where does the money for the fees technically end up getting deposited at then?
More than likely, the fire department.
Stay in-house, okay, gotcha. That's all I have, but thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, just a little update. We get inspected about every 6 months, at least every 6 months or more. And a hood cleaning is $300 to $400 for our one hood we got. And the inspector comes from, used to be the guy right out here, and takes him about an hour, and it's about $150 a year to inspect the fire extinguisher system. So.
Mr. Hossie?
Yeah, I think my last comment is really about the compliance side of how do we make, do compliance. I know we've mentioned code enforcement, but what I think code enforcement, they're more reactive to complaint-driven basis, and it's all citizen-driven. I would really like the mobile food units to be more proactive, is that you're due for an inspection, and we just need to know when to go out and inspect it. And I don't know that a reactive code compliance enforcement is really going to be effective. And I don't like passing laws or rules that we don't enforce. And so as much as I want the council to, support whatever rules we decide on, I don't know that code enforcement is the right one, the way that we operate today, because versus just they're on a reactive complaint-only basis type of system, where I think we really, with food safety and fire safety, it needs to be a little more reactive or proactive approach to when are you due, and because I know that finance needs to know this as well. As when we first started the food and beverage tax and we had it as an occupation tax, our ability to get compliance was very challenging because it's a lot of education, a lot of phone calls, a lot of maybe go knock on the door kind of stuff. I mean, and like the amount of effort that it would take for finance to get compliance with an occupation tax like food and beverage, it was a yeoman's effort to get everybody on board. And as we, as a community, keep rolling and evolving, it's the same type of effort that's going to be needed. And I don't know if, if code enforcement's the right tool to do the compliance checks. And so I think we need to maybe look at that one a little bit closer and look at how do we want to best manage that compliance side.
Mr. Shear, well, first, Mr. Brown.
So on the new software that we're implementing, this Citizen Serve, we can, so it's very, like, you can really put anything in there that you want. So we'll put in dates as in when it was approved, and then it would also then send out a form or email, probably an email to the owners saying, hey, it's up time for renewal. So we're getting close to the 21st century.
Mr. Sheard.
Thank you. In regards to what Chuck's talking about with the enforcement, is there a camaraderie amongst or a organization of any sort that they belong to, or is there a band of brothers of the food truck world in Grand Island?
Close.
Okay.
The UNL Extension Office has a class or group that meets, that teaches them how to get their food trucks going, and then also in hopes that they would move to a brick and mortar. That's kind of the whole thing, and there's one lady that's in charge of that. She is also bilingual and was my interpreter on the Spanish only.
Fantastic.
That's the closest I have, is to like kind of a group leader.
There's so many organizations that if there's regulations about it, there's a pride in being up to regulation and I'll say camaraderie or a expectation that if you join us and you're not up to snuff, we want you to get there because you give us all a bad name. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to help push that along or promote this, because it is an expense, but their business model should incorporate that. I guess to me, if you're going to have a business, I'm a business owner, I have expenses. It's a part of doing business. Even if it's a business that isn't traditional, that's still going to be an expense. So finding a way to get them to comply, tracking them down, I don't know, Chuck, if it's not code enforcement, do we want GIPD out going around door to door either? I don't really want that, and I don't know if I want the fire department doing it. So finding out what is the right way, I think it's a good discussion for us at some point, but I think code enforcement is probably where we start.
I just comment on that.
You absolutely can. You have the microphone.
We do this with businesses in town and restaurants right now that aren't paying their permit or they have violations, and it comes, I have a system that I've kind of worked through that once we get to this day, just like Hawsey said, is I go knock on their door. I go knock on their door and, hey, we need to get this done. So I'm guessing if the food trucks get to that, it'll probably be me, but there's a certain point where it's got to go past me. And that's, that's for you guys to decide and the legal.
Difficulty here is, brick and mortar doesn't move around town and avoid you.
Right? Well, kind of.
So we want to make sure we can support this, knowing that it's a different, that, it's a different beast than just a regular brick and mortar. I think that's been an issue probably from the beginning of these, and that's why it's been this long since we've been getting to this point, is tracking them down, finding them, knowing where they are, and you find them, whether it's looking for this or, as Pat talked about, getting them to get their food and beverage taxes paid, then they move across town and you don't know where they are. So we don't have little beacons on them all, and it's all voluntary to start with. So it's a tough thing, but I appreciate you doing the work.
Thank you, Division Chief Thomas, for your good work. We have completed our agenda. We are adjourned. Good evening, everybody.